We are live, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to the May 26th White Cliffs Committee meeting pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. This meeting will be live streamed, but will not include public participation. With that, I think we're ready to go. There was a meeting that was posted. We're going to move around a little bit. I don't think we're really prepared to talk about the minutes yet. So we're going to move right into the main event for today, which is the discussion about the South Chimney. And I believe Mr. Thornton is going to talk mostly about that.
So so through the chair, Scott Charpentier, DPW director, and Sean Thompson, who is our facilities manager. I'm not sure you've had the privilege of meeting Sean. He's been with us for a short amount of time, but he's done a great job getting information together on our public buildings, and we have pulled him into the White Cliffs project. So moving forward, Sean is going to be part of the staff that'll be assisting with the White Cliffs. And so his background obviously is facilities management, and Sean with Scott Charpentier has been working to assess the South Chimney and to get contractor quotes. And we're prepared to have a discussion today about some options moving forward. As you all know, the chimney has been deteriorating. It was one of the items that was identified in the original assessment done by the architectural firm, DBVW. They at the time had recommended, if budget was permitting, that that chimney be rebuilt and repointed. Some of it needed to be disassembled because it was in rough shape. At the time, the committee decided not to pursue that due to the cost and the limited budget that we had while we were trying to figure out how best to proceed. So we made a decision to hold off on that. Unfortunately, the chimney did not do well in a recent storm. We lost some bricks and it's in pretty rough shape. So we have a couple decisions to make in terms of how we proceed. Do we rebuild the chimney? Do we disassemble it and cap it for the time being as we figure out how best to move forward? Those are the two main options, and Scott and Sean can speak to those. And from a budgetary standpoint, we've been working with multiple masons to go out there and look at it. I had originally signed when the couple bricks first let loose. I'd signed a contract for a little over $6,000 for a mason to go out there and to just secure the building, to secure the chimney. Unfortunately, when they got out there, they looked at it and they said, no, it's a much larger and more significant project. As we knew, a good portion of it needed to be rebuilt previously. It hasn't improved with time, as we all know. So their recommendation is, well, you can either take it down and rebuild it or take it down and cap it, depending on what the budgetary implications are, whether or not we have the funds to proceed. As I said in the beginning, we chose not to do that portion of the recommended project for budgetary considerations, just like the architect had recommended that we remove the deteriorating additions. We didn't have the funds to do that either. So this building needs a lot of work, as we know. It's going to continue to need a lot of work. So what we need to figure out is what are our next steps to get us to the next phase of the project. So we do need to address this chimney. It's a safety hazard, and we don't want any more damage to be done to the building. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott and Sean to talk about what they have come back with after talking to several different masons and getting different quotes and options for how we might proceed.
Thanks, John. I'll give a little more detailed description of how we got to where we are today, and then Sean will touch base on the quote that we have before us now that we want to consider. So as John indicated, we knew the chimney was in bad shape early on. We did get a contract signed that John outlined with, actually it was the same mason who did the masonry restoration work at the library. They were actually familiar with White Cliffs. They've been out there a couple times to look at it with us. We signed a contract. They mobilized with the lift. When they got the lift up in the air and were able to observe the chimney close up and in detail, they saw the back side of the chimney, which is on the north side of the south chimney, on the building side, is bowed out substantially as well. So it's not just that front corner that's problematic. It's the entire perimeter in that lower section of the chimney that's compromised. When they looked at that, they realized they're unable to support and secure the chimney as it is. They removed their lift from the site. They were nice enough not to charge us for the half a day and the rental cost for that, which was a little bit of a benefit to us. And so we searched around for other contractors who have the skills, knowledge, and ability to do this relatively quickly. Sean was able to reach out to one that we're familiar with, NEL Corporation. They were actually the ones who did the roof project at the library as well, the slate work. So they're very familiar with historic properties as well as masonry, controlled disassembly. I would prefer to call this a disassembly project as opposed to a demolition. We did describe to them the requirements we have. Most importantly, don't damage the existing structure. Second, make sure that cap is kept intact and in good condition, and then save as many of the fascia bricks as we can. So I'm going to let Sean kind of give a little more of a detail on what transpired with NEL and go over the costs associated with it.
Yeah, so like Scott and John had already mentioned, once we got up on the roof, the damage was much more extensive than we thought. So we needed to find a contractor that was going to be able to preserve this as much as possible. The ultimate goal will be to get it back to where it was, but at this point, the main concern from the contractor and from us is getting it down before it falls into the building. The way it's bowed out in the back, it could really at any point fall either into that front porch or into the turret on the right-hand side if you're looking at the building. So at this point, I think our best bet is to just demo or destruct it down and then cap it until we can find a person who can put it back to where it was. Because even the cap itself on the top of the roof or at the top of the chimney, it has cracks in it. So getting it off in one piece is going to be a challenge. And then we're going to need to put it back on. So it's a lot more involved. So I think our main focus should be just making it safe and watertight, and then we can get accurate numbers for the rebuild. The structure from the roof line down seems to be still somewhat intact, where we can get away with just repointing those areas. So it's not going to have to be a full takedown and build up, but we need to get the unsafe part of it off and then proceed from there.
So we received, we went up to the site with NEL, got a price from them, $55,400. That includes mobilizing a crane to remove the cap, strapping everything, securing the existing remaining chimney and sealing it off from the building, from the weather, and also storing and stockpiling the bricks. They agreed to save as many of the fascia bricks as possible. The capacity or ability for us to reuse those, we really won't know until they're down and see what conditions they're in. So again, the price is $55,400. I certainly don't recommend this committee authorize that number, because as most of us or all of us know, when you're dealing with a project like this, unforeseen conditions arise. Adding roughly a 10% contingency on this gets that number up to $60,000. If this committee determines to to move forward with this approach. Our recommendation is a value of $60,000.
Just through the chair, if I may, just for sake of discussions, there's two options here: is to deconstruct and cap it for the time being. The other is to rebuild the whole chimney. So we did have some discussions about that. Originally, I believe the quotes came in somewhere around $110,000 to rebuild the chimney. The committee at the time decided not to move forward because it was going to take up a substantial amount of the limited budget that we had to try to stabilize the structure. As you know, right now, price escalation is pretty significant around the trades at the moment. But Scott or Sean, we did look at what it would cost to take it down and to rebuild it all at the same time. And I think those numbers came in somewhere in the $150,000 neighborhood, if not more. So that is well beyond anything that we have budgetarily. That would eliminate anything that we have in terms of funding for carrying costs on the structure. So that's kind of where we are now. Maybe through the chair, it'd be a good time to have a little bit of discussion about thoughts on proceeding.
Sure. Questions? Tom, you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I had a couple of questions regarding the disassembly down to the roof line and storage of the materials. What kind of cap would you put at this partially demolished chimney?
It would be exterior grade plywood, roofing membrane, and flashing, including caulking of any voids between those.
And what is the condition of the chimney from the roof line down to grade?
Well, judging on our current evaluation, it's stable and obviously requires cleaning and pointing. We'll know a lot more once the top portion of it is disassembled, and we can see in the annulus between the fascia brick and the chimney core.
So what is the chimney core? Is it some kind of block?
Sean,
that's brick.
It's brick.
It's all brick.
It's all brick.
Is it double wipe or is it just single?
So it's got an outside layer and then an inside chamber, but it's all brick. So essentially a double layer, but they're not interlocked. And then the actual footing of the chimney is brownstone inside that front porch. So that's really solid. And from what they could see on the lift when we were up that day and found the bulge on the back, they're pretty confident that from the porch line up to the roof line can be just repointed and reset. But like Scott said, we'll know more once we're able to get that top portion down, because then we can safely get under there and really get eyes on it. Right now, it's just too unstable up top to comfortably bring anybody in that close. So
regarding the repointing, the contractor you talked to, did he analyze the type of mortar that was used 130 years ago?
We had an engineering firm do that initially with that initial proposal. So that's all been presented to any contractor that's come to look at the project for us. So they're aware of what needs to be done there.
Yeah, when we put together the quote that John referenced to rebuild the chimney, we provided the contractor with the technical specifications that the architect developed. So everything that we've discussed here has been based on the architectural documents that were put out to bid, the historic studies that were prepared in conjunction with the master's report, as well as Sean outlined, eyes on the ground. So that's the basis for everything we're discussing.
So are you confident that they could do a repointing that would not be in conflict with the existing 130-year-old weathered chimney?
I'm not a historic preservationist, and I'm not a mason. I rely on experts for that. So if we have a quality technical specification developed by a historic architectural firm and a good contractor who's done restoration work, like the contractor we put on the lift, then my confidence is high. Personally, I don't know anything about this stuff in any detail other than what I've read.
We're working off the original specs that DBVW, the architect that we hired, put together, and I do know they took that into consideration. We spent some time talking about making sure that the mortar was appropriate, but that would be in the specs that DBVW had put together, which has been provided to the contractors. But those are all things that would be verified, in the contract with them, making sure that those specs are cited and that we're clear about what materials are being used.
And do you think the documents of the existing chimney are adequate to reconstruct? I know they did a bitmap scanning of the inside and the outside. So if we were to store the disassembled chimney parts and went to rebuild it, we've got adequate documentation to be able to bid that to get it reconstructed?
We've already done that a few years ago when the bids went out. Whether the architect put together a complete and concise technical specification for disassembly and reconstruction, I don't know. Again, I'm not a historic preservationist, so I would not know that. I trust that our architects do, though.
We just want to make sure that is in place. The documentation is in place before you disassemble it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit more about the scans that were done, but that could happen offline if need be.
Yeah, I mean, we can circle back and have a quick chat with DBVW in terms of letting them know what the situation is and whether or not they feel there's adequate specifications to complete the reconstruction at the appropriate time.
I have a question. Is there any way you could bring up a photo of the chimney as it is today? Because to be honest with you, I'm getting a little bit lost. It sounds like some of it will be disassembled, yet some of it will be repointed. Is there any way you can bring a picture up and show me what you're talking about? Because in my head, I'm having a completely different image of what you're mentioning.
Sean, while we're discussing this, can you send me a picture and I'll share it?
They're in the directory.
They are, okay. All right, I'll find one for you right now.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you. I guess I'll just give you my opinion. My kind of opinion on this is to get us to a situation where we don't have any more water entry into the building and we preserve some of the bricks as best we can for the chimney. I'm not excited about rebuilding the chimney at this point. I think when we go through our budget and what we need to do, there may be some things in that building we need to do now that are more important than rebuilding the chimney. If we have deep pockets, that's a different topic.
Trying to find a good one right now.
A good one, a good picture of a failed chimney. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So just in terms of remaining funds, the reason why we didn't pursue that or the removal of the additions as again, the architect that we hired to do the assessment gave us a priority listing of things that we should do and things that it would be great to do if we had the funding. And so we did the things that were critical to button up the building envelope. We didn't remove the additions, even though some of the smaller ones off the back are in really bad shape, but we did seal them off from the historic part of the building. The chimney, they said, should last for a period of time. Obviously, things got delayed with COVID, so we're a little further down the line than I think we had thought we might be at this juncture, but it is what it is. But we did make, with the assistance of the architect, some informed decisions about things that needed to be done and things that would need to be postponed. But as we look at it, we're going to, the chimney is going to require us to address it. There's no question about that. That's going to take a big chunk out of the remaining budget. The only other thing budgetarily that we have carrying costs. So there's insurance, electricity, and things of that nature, ongoing, just basic maintenance. There's storage fees that are associated with historic documents and so forth. So we do need to carry those through the next fiscal year. And the idea was we were holding enough funding aside to determine what consulting services we'd like to hire for us to basically market the building, to try to find a private sector partner to put a scope of services together and help us market the structure, to find somebody to work with us to rehab what we term preservation light. So this is like the minimum preserving of the streetscape and the interior to get the building, back on. But we need to find a partner. So the problem now is we're going to have to address this chimney, which we weren't planning to do in this phase. And it's going to really leave us with a very limited budget to engage a consultant. So that's sort of the second phase. We do have some options there, which we'll talk about later on in the agenda. But for now, Scott, you want to bring pictures up of the chimney? So
I wish I could. Unfortunately, my computer doesn't have the technical capability. I've been trying, but it won't let me.
Oh, it came in and then disappeared.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it came in twice.
Oh, okay, because my screen wasn't showing it. It said share is paused.
No.
Okay.
So I want you to bring it in.
Yep. All right. Let me find it again. I'll show you the cap right now.
Okay, we can see it.
That's the cap. And this is the.
Do you have a picture that's a little bit more zoomed out, Scott, so we can kind of see the whole chimney in a shot? Maybe is that what you're looking for?
I can't seem to locate one, John.
I'll pull one up and send one over to you. Give me a sec.
Okay.
While you're doing that, we can continue the discussion.
So I can give you a little bio on the kind of the 10,000-foot budget status, if you like, John.
Sure.
So the remaining budget as we sit today, as we sit at the beginning of May, was about $111,000. It was $110,775. So call it $111,000. In order for our carrying costs going forward through September of 23, so a little bit after town meeting, we would have approximately $30,000 left. That includes some of the things we're going to discuss today. The chimney disassembly, some air quality work, some electrical work, and all of our carrying costs, which includes fire alarm monitoring, electricity, the storage fees we have, insurance, and those things. So again, we're sitting on about $111K now. If we were to go forward with what we're talking about today, including the chimney just deconstruction and the other items, we'd have approximately $30,000 left after next year's town meeting.
You said September 23rd is that the date?
September 23, like
September
2023. So after next year's
Yeah.
town meeting, and next fiscal year has been established, that's about what we'll have left, $30,000. And we spend about $15,000 to $20,000 a year in carrying costs, depending on fire alarm repairs and electricity and things like that. But just for insurance and storage and small electrical bills and phone bills for the alarms, we're about 15 to 20 grand a year, just to carry it. All right.
I hope before we leave today that we can at least think through what we need for future funding because of the CPA cycle and the like.
All right. Let me know if you can see this.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So you saw the picture of the cap deterioration.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of see it between these. The cap originally from the ground, I thought it was just a solid cast iron cap, but it's obviously a segmented cap. The chimney condition here, you can see the core bricks that Sean was talking about, and the facade bricks, and the fact that they're not connected at all. As you come down, the ornate portion above the dormer, or adjacent to the dormer, is a repointing condition, but we'll be able to do a better assessment once the top is disassembled. So see if I can zoom that out. Okay. So Norm, you wanted a little more inclusive photograph?
Yes, because this is, now that I see the chimney, I have a much better idea of what you're speaking of. So if the disassembly would be from the top to that roof line, that pointed roof line right there. Is that correct? That's the part that's being disassembled.
Yes.
Disassembled. And below that, you would look at if it needed some pointing, if that makes sense.
Well, we're not going to point now because there's no budget for pointing.
Oh, okay, thank you. But if you scroll further down, there was another section of that chimney that was visually starting to fail back 2 years ago.
Yep. So there may be, so the peak is likely here. You can see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so the peak behind is likely here. So my guess is that this assembly is going to go, probably somewhere down here.
Okay.
Till you get to sound brick. What we don't want to have is, the loose core brick condition that may be problematic in the future, because this thing needs to hold snow load. Once the plywood and membrane goes on, it has to hold snow. So we may end up more down maybe to the peak of the plywood, would be my thought.
And how about the lower part of that chimney that had defect and that looked weak? This is from the DBW report that had an image of it.
Our mason looked at it, and it's now, right now, we're not talking about where the decorative failures are. It's where the structural failures are. And our both masons that have been out there have looked at it and said it's sound, below the peak. So can I tell you today that it won't fall down in 3 or 4 years? I can't. I don't know. But the experts are telling us that it's sound. It's stable, I should say.
Because that was the part we expected failure, not the higher part.
Right. We never really saw the higher part up close. I mean, we couldn't. The first time we saw the backside of this bowed out was, with the man lift.
Thank you for bringing that image up. It helps me out a lot.
Okay.
I'll
go right back to him.
Because my question is going to be, where is the bowing out that you're referring to?
So it's behind here. See where this little crescent window is?
Yeah.
If the middle one wasn't boarded up, you could look through it and it would be that face of the chimney. So the back side of the face we're looking at.
So it's not bowing out into any part of the building?
Yes, it is. Bowing right out over the roof.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep. So where this face has failed, the opposite side, the back side of that is bowing out.
That doesn't sound good.
That's why we're not sure if it's going to fall, like Sean indicated, sideways onto the lower porch and turret, or back into the core of the building.
And did the masons comment on, are we looking at a really, tenuous situation here, or?
Yes, anytime you're doing I'll use the term demolition around a sound structure that you don't want to damage, it's a delicate process. I mean,
And that's kind of why they steered away from doing that shoring work that we were initially going to do, is because with that back left corner compromised, you can't get on the roof and safely shore it without the risk of it falling unpredictably. So now with this proposal we have, they're going to be coming in with a crane and lifting the top off so that it can pull some of the weight off, so then we can get in there safely. And everything's going to be done from a lift, because you can't get a staging company in there until that top part comes down. So even if we want to spend the money to rebuild, regardless, that this top portion has to come off before we can do any of that work, because it's just not safe to be anywhere near it till that top part comes down.
So Sean, you said that looks like clay tile for the cap. So it's an assembled cap.
The cap
not
looks like
monolithic.
it looks like it's terracotta based on the feedback I got from the mason.
Terracotta overlaid on brick.
Yeah.
So how would you lift it?
So the idea would be to, initially they wanted to drill holes into the cap and pull it off, but we want to try and preserve it as much as we can. So they're going to remove a couple of the underlaying bricks and slide some type of 2x6, 2x8 through there, tie into that and pull it off in one piece. That's the plan for right now.
Are there not clay tile flues in the middle of this chimney?
I think from what we can see, it's just that inner chamber. So it's the bricks on the inside. So they're going to come through that and up.
So there's no liners. There's no flue liners inside. It's all just brick.
Yeah.
Okay.
we didn't see any. I mean, when you go down deeper, there may be a flue liner that goes up past that peak point and then stops. And then above that, because you're not really concerned with the heat when you just get above that. And then it may just be fire bricks on the inside, but we'll disassembly will tell us a lot more.
Yeah, that's why, as Scott pointed out, there needs to be a contingency, because clearly there's going to be things that we aren't going to know until we get into the mix here.
Scott, is it possible that I can share a screen?
You could probably share it better than me, Mr. Corbin. Let me give you co-hosting abilities.
That sounds too important.
Here you go. You are now a co-host.
All right, let me see if I can do this. You seeing that screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so this is from right out of the DPVW report. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So they highlighted this area right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Okay, so they highlighted that this was their fear of a problem, and this is a close-up of this. What you're talking about today, will anybody take a hard look at this and make sure that this can be, I don't want to say fixed, but made more secure?
Maybe shoring up.
So I think it looks like that second photo at the bottom is actually up top where it failed at that peak, just based on the roof line.
Right.
That looks like the right-hand corner of the area where it actually blew out on.
Yeah, that doesn't look like where that square is.
Yeah, the square's down, the angle of the roof is different. So that's got to be up.
That's okay. That's a good observation, because
I think DBW has
they mismarked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
It's
I
up
think
here.
their area of concern is where we actually ended up with the issue.
Right there, yeah, the blue circle.
Very good. That's that helps a lot.
Makes
Thank
more
you.
sense now, Norm, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're just looking at the roof line. I can see the bugaboo. Yep. All right. Thank you. Stop that.
Yeah, that makes much more sense now. So at this point, I don't know if there's any more discussion or questions.
I think Julianne has something.
Can we just clear up the numbers here? Okay, so to rebuild is $110,000 in yesterday's money, right?
That was the original quote from a couple of years ago. So that rebuild is north of 150,000 now.
Okay.
And that, just to continue, that rebuild was based on the prior chimney condition. And Sean just outlined the concerns that our masons have had in safety. They can't put staging around it in its current condition. I don't know what the original bid was, if it included staging and removal from a staged construction site and then rebuilding it. But that's not the case anymore, because you can't put personnel on staging adjacent to that chimney in its current unsafe condition.
Okay. To deconstruct, to put it nicely, and store and stockpile is $55,400.
Yes, but I would recommend a contingency.
60
Okay.
with a contingency.
Okay, so for another 100,000, we might, or more, probably a lot more, do the whole thing, deconstruct, rebuild.
So the 150 that they're mentioning, that's after it was deconstructed. So that would be on top of this 60. So you're looking at like 210 all in.
Oh, okay. So that's a different number. Okay. You're looking at 210 in today's dollars, you think, or?
That was back in February. So maybe even a little bit more now, because gas prices have gone up quite a bit.
Did you ever get a written proposal or anything?
No, they gave us verbals just because we weren't sure what direction we were going to move in. So we were going to get the written ones once we made a decision on how we were going to proceed forward.
So we don't even have a written one on the 55.4 for the.
No, we have a written one on that. Yes, just
Okay.
not on the rebuild because it was such a large number. And we knew our funds were limited. We wanted to meet with you guys and have a chance to discuss options before we got formal proposals. Because at that number anyway, we're bidding out. We have to bid out and advertise and do all that stuff anyhow.
Yeah, so Sean makes a good point, Julianne. In order for us to, if it's a $210,000 number to deconstruct and rebuild, that's not something that we have specifications on currently for to put on the street for bidding. We can legally do the disassembly or deconstruction, the $60,000 scope of work, without bidding it out. If we're going to do the full $210,000 worth of work, we need to tack on top of that the cost for an architect to develop technical specifications on how to do this safely and correctly.
Because it's under 60 or under?
Yeah, well, for the demolition is a bit different, or the deconstruction is a bit different than the full reconstruction. We don't have technical specifications developed for what we're talking about here. We'll know the expertise in-house to do it, so we would have to engage the architect. Okay,
and so my next question is for Tom, because Tom, you seem to be rightfully concerned about the historic aspect of this and making sure that everything will be rebuilt the way it was. So were you suggesting that we go back to DVBW and get more information? Was there something that
I know they did a detailed, bit mapping is a three-dimensional measuring system, and they did it for the inside and the outside. So they probably have very good documentation of this chimney already, from which whoever does the design of the reconstruction could work from. So that's a big plus. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that when you reconstruct a chimney, it has to be to the current building codes. And if this is going to be a functional chimney and your original design did not have flue tiles, you'll have to add flue tiles. So that changes the configuration. And my concern is how to reconstruct a 130-year-old chimney to meet current building code requirements. Now, they haven't done that analysis yet, so we don't know what that would cost, but I'm just cautioning everybody, you can't reconstruct what was there because it won't meet current code.
Mhm.
And what those implications are, we don't know yet.
And that's if you want it to be functional.
Right.
If you want it to be decorative,
Couldn't you,
Correct.
I mean, as long as the exterior masonry is built to the current design, to the original design,
Mhm.
the interior, there, it seems like you wouldn't necessarily have to build it in the same way. You may still be able to put in the flue and not have the same dimensions that exist now. We don't know that yet, right?
It's not
This is-
exactly
this is why
kosher
it's a-
preservation, but
Can I-
Yeah, no, I know, but it,
I'm not sure why we're spending so much time talking about the reconstruction of the chimney. We don't have the budget for it. It's probably several years away. And I really want to get back on some of these agenda items that are more significant right now. Personally, if you can disassemble that section, put it in storage and keep the water from coming out, I'm happy with that. It might be a partner who we partner with. We'll have to figure out how to deal with the chimneys and how to fix them and the like. So if I may interrupt, I'd like to move on to more of the agenda at this point.
So honestly, I brought it up because the Board of Selectmen are going to have to decide on how to spend $4.25 million with ARPA funds. And John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a lot of leeway with that money. And before we make any big decisions about these costs, I would like to have my board weigh in on whether or not they think that's a legitimate use of ARPA funds.
unless I'm mistaken, the chimney needs to be deconstructed regardless. So whether or not ARPA funds, or we want to go back to town meeting to do anything else, they're two separate steps. It has to be deconstructed at this point. And then whether or not you want to use ARPA funds down the line to rebuild this chimney, that's less time sensitive. So as Sean pointed out, they're two separate processes now. That the chimney needs to be deconstructed, and then the rebuild is a separate process, and it's a much more complicated process that would require architectural drawings, specifications, and so forth. That's something that's going to would take some significant time. So I don't. So whether or not the board wanted to do something like that down the road, that is available as for discussion. But I don't know that it changes the immediate need to deconstruct this thing and to make it watertight. There's no economies of scale, I don't believe, to do it. Well, there's some mobilization costs, to bring a mason back if they deconstruct and then they leave the site, but those are fairly minimal. But it's much more complicated, as Tom has pointed out, in terms of making sure that there's specifications that are done by an architect. They have time to create drawings and put them out on the street and bid it and so forth. So whether or not the board wants to use ARPA funds, again, that is a potential for White Cliffs, not just for the chimney, but for other aspects of White Cliffs. But I don't know that. I don't know that the two at this stage are tied together, Julian. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying, that it has to be done in stages, but as you mentioned the words economy of scale, I just wonder, once the equipment is on site, it costs a lot of money to rent cranes and whatever they need.
Well,
If we would be saving money by just thinking about the whole
I
process.
don't think there's just no time. You're not going to leave that equipment on site for months while you're getting design work done.
This is different equipment too. This is, we're talking about bringing a crane out. We're not going to use a crane to rebuild the chimney. They're going to set up a massive set of staging, which can't be done right now because the chimney's not safe. So if we were to bid this thing out, a contractor is going to come in with a crane, take the chimney down, and then the crane's going to leave. Then they're going to come in with a staging company and they're going to stage it. So outside of like bringing a job box in and maybe a trailer or something, there's really it's different. It's a different process. And Tom,
I see. Okay. All right. I was just wondering if there would be any saving of time and equipment.
Minimal at this point.
Can can we move on to the other topics of the agenda? Because there is someone here that I think are really critical and we might need opera funding for.
I
Thank
believe we're gonna need a motion though, right?
The committee needs to, we're looking for some
So,
direction
Norm?
here. Is everybody in agreement that we should proceed with the demolition or deconstruction and capping of the chimney?
Where is this stuff going to be stored? On site?
Yeah, we'll put it out back in the parking lot.
Okay.
Well, you could put it in the basement.
It's where it's gonna end up if we don't do something.
So would someone would
Go ahead.
make a motion? Is that what we're looking for, Todd?
Yes, it is.
I'd like to make a motion for $60,000 to deconstruct the chimney and cap it and keep the moisture out and store the bricks on the property.
I second it.
All right, motion's been, any discussion?
Should be a
Alright.
roll call, it needs to be a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, let's start. Norm,
Yes.
Julianne,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes,
and I vote yes, motion carries.
Hey, Scott and Sean, thank you for all this detailed work. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Norm.
All right, John, you want to go to the air quality, or you want to go to the budget?
We should discuss some of the issues. So Sean Thompson, as I said, our facilities manager, has been out there. He and Scott Charpentier have some concerns about the air quality in the building and are recommending a couple of things that intending to address some of that or to mitigate it. So actually, through the chair, I would turn it back over to those two.
All right, so Sean, if you want to touch base a bit on the mold analysis, and then what our thoughts are on remediation, and maybe Laura, you can come in on what's important about the electrical work and the interior conditioning.
Yeah, so as we're getting ready for the marketing study and everything, we're just trying to understand the condition of the building and things that a potential partner may come back at us to try and help with. So it's very evident just from walking in the building that it's very damp and there's a smell to it. So I brought a restoration company in just to do an analysis of where they think we're at and if they had any recommendations on how we can kind of mitigate issues going forward and limit further issues. And so they had recommended that we section off parts of the building that we plan on keeping and run dehumidifiers in there because there is surface mold on some things in the building and that are going to require cleaning and some just complete removal and disposal. So the other thing they had recommended was having an air quality test done so we can understand exactly what is happening in the building. And then based on the information we get back, we can make other decisions going forward. Knowing that it's an old building and hasn't been inhabited in a while, we didn't feel comfortable just plugging dehumidifiers into any of the existing outlets because we don't want there to be any type of like electrical fire or anything like that. So I had an electrician come out, give us a number to put a temporary panel inside the building where we can run heavy duty extension cords off of to the individual dehumidifiers. Then we can have some type of moisture control in the building, but also peace of mind knowing that the electrical is brand new sound and we don't have any other issues going forward. So the air quality test would be like $3,200. The electrical panels, $4,300. And then for the dehumidifiers and other supplies to block off the rooms, you're looking at another $4,000 to $4,800. So that's where we are with that next phase.
Sean,
Yes.
did you see any more moisture coming in after the roof was repaired, or has that been solved?
Yeah, no, that's been solved. We don't have any water intrusion, but the issue is it's been in unconditioned space. So especially as we get into the summer months where the humidity is really high, if we're not keeping that down, we're still gonna run into that issue. Anytime you have moisture, humidity above 60%, you have food for it to grow on, and you have light, you're going to have mold. So if we don't want the conditions to worsen, we need to somehow regulate that humidity level.
Yeah, I mean, just as a point of reference, a couple years back, it depends on what the ambient temperature and humidity levels are. We never had issues in any of our schools. And then a couple years back, we had a very humid summer and we wound up with mold in Proctor School. And this is a new building and the envelope is solid. It's just ambient moisture and there was no dehumidification taking place there. So we had to remediate that. This building, again, is unoccupied. And if we wind up with a very humid summer, it's going to be exacerbated.
So if you dehumidify the first floor and you don't isolate it from a humid basement, you get a dry surface on the top and a wet on, you're going to get cupping in all those hardwood floors. So did they address that?
They didn't. But we'd be able to, with this dehumidification process, we just add a couple down in the basement.
Okay, so it's the first floor, possibly parts of the second, and the basement. Okay, 3 levels.
Yeah, the goal and objective wouldn't be to get the basement to the same condition as above. And Sean and Lori made a good point. Sean made a good point that conditioning this space will hopefully hit the pause button on what's going on with mold and moisture there.
Right.
But before we do that, we want to get our testing in there to see exactly what the extent is of the mold, specifically woodwork and walls behind the wallpaper and the ceilings.
And remember, based on the architect's recommendations, because we could not, and we're not prepared to remove those additions off the back that were compromised and in rough shape before we even took possession, we did seal off those sections of the structure from the historic portion. So that was an initial step to keep the water that is still infiltrating on those deteriorated additions, keeping that moisture from the building. But again, it's just in the summertime, it's just ambient humidity is in an unconditioned space. It like I said, we had it in schools that are brand new with perfectly good envelopes. So it's just a concern, an ongoing concern. And by the way, the cost of the air quality test and the dehumidifiers and any isolation work is in that budget that Scott Charpentier had mentioned. So we're assuming we move forward with that. That's the $30,000 remaining budget is net of those expenses that we've just discussed.
Sean, could you run those numbers by me again? I wasn't quick enough writing.
Yeah, so the air quality test is $3,178. The temporary panel would be $4,300. And then the dehumidifiers, extension cords, and other miscellaneous supplies to isolate the rooms that we want to control would be roughly $4,000 to $4,800. $4,000 to $4,800.
One thing that I'm not sure is in the budget, though, is if we are running all these dehumidifiers, that the electric costs are going to go up. I'm not sure if that's been factored in, Sean. So we'd have to take
it hasn't. But the good thing about the dehumidifiers that we're looking at is we can set the humidity percentage on the higher end, just as long as we keep it in the 40 to 60 range, we should be fine. And I've run the same ones at my house, and the cost isn't, it doesn't jump that much.
Okay, good.
So it's not too bad.
So adding that up, we're looking at something between $12,500 and $13,000. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Julianne?
John, do we rent that equipment or buy it?
No, we'd buy it. Just because it's always good to have anyway, especially with the facilities. And if we're going to be doing this for an extended period of time, which sounds like we're going to, you'd be paying more in rental than purchase for the dehumidifiers. They would cost us more in the long run. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. It's an investment then, so
yeah.
At least look at it that way.
Yep.
So these are industrial scale dehumidifiers that are piped outside.
They're not the industrial size ones. Those are a lot more expensive. You're talking like $2,400–2,500 a piece. These would just be your typical residential ones, but they have built-in pumps in them as well, though. So they'll be pumping themselves out. We won't have to worry about sending somebody over every 3 hours to empty them.
And after you reduce the humidity, were you planning on doing some remediation to the mold? And
so that's something we can talk about and determine once we figure out what we're dealing with after the air quality test. And once we decide what we're doing with the building altogether. I think the main focus here is just controlling the situation where we're at and not letting it get any worse.
One of the things that was done early on that Sean indicated was some visual mold observations and moisture content, and the walls are wet. The ceiling is wet from the humidity. The mold analysis is going to include tape lifts, so we'll see what the surfaces have, and the discussion, the topic you brought up, Tom. A lot of that's going to be driven by, how bad and how deep the mold is. Has it penetrated the surface finishes on the wood? Or is it in the wood, or is it just on the surface, the walls? Is it just at the joints of the walls, or is it embedded in the plaster behind the wallpaper? So those are the things we need to determine to see how deep this problem is.
It's pretty small money. I kind of wish we did this 2 years ago with only 15 grand. But Sean, I'm glad you're on board to help us get this up and running. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
The only other thing is, if it's not an industrial humidifier, who's making sure that it's the right size or has the right capacity? Because that, even the mansion is big.
So they give you square footage ratings based on the size of the dehumidifier that you purchase. So I did all the math and everything, so we're good.
Okay.
And like I said, the main thing is just being able to consistently pump it out. And
Yes.
they have the built-in pumps, so that's why they're a little bit more pricey than ones that don't. But yeah, we'll be fine. And
Norm, this isn't going to be a set it and forget it. I mean, and the building currently isn't a set it and forget it. Sean goes to the building weekly, does a walkthrough, makes sure the conditions haven't changed. With dehumidification, that'll be part of the observations every week. And something looks different, there's eyes on it. So we will see.
Thank you.
All right, you want to vote on that too?
Sure.
Is the number you guys are looking for 15?
Yes.
Want to make a motion for me?
Was everybody so shy? All right, I'll make the
moved.
motion. Huh? Was there any
So
other
moved.
questions?
So moved by, do I have a second?
second,
Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Let's do a roll call vote. Norm,
Yes.
Julianne,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Tom,
yes.
and I vote yes as well. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, you want to talk about the remaining budget and how we're going to get more money?
Sure. So as we said, based on the votes that were taken at the meeting today, we are estimating there's about $30,000 left in the original budget. Again, this is including carrying costs through September of 2023. So there are anticipated costs We have Norm did a lot of legwork contacting potential consultants that might be able to help us create the RFP, market the place, and find a partner to get this building back online and functioning again. So those numbers are ranging, as you can imagine. It's difficult when we started talking to people about what exactly is the scope of services. And the original one was Pellegrin, Eric Bush, who had worked with DBVW, and he sort of threw out a blanket figure of around 30,000, pending some more detail. We've since had some pretty extensive discussions with VHB and a few others. So those consulting services, to bring somebody in to put an RFP together for marketing the structure, and to help us get out there and drum up folks who would potentially be interested in partnering with the town to come to a reuse for the building. They're ranging from 30, but more likely upwards around 40,000. So we have, as I said, about $30,000 left. We are looking at about $40,000 to engage a consultant to move us through this preservation light that we had focused on at the conclusion of the work we did with DBVW in the last feasibility phase. So looking around, there's a couple of options. We could seek ARPA funding if the Board of Selectmen were inclined, but probably a better approach at this juncture would be to come back to the Community Preservation Committee. They have administrative funds. I believe they have about $28,000 remaining in the fiscal 2022 administrative account that in my conversations with the chairman, he doesn't see any needs coming. Again, we're at the end of the fiscal year. So the recommendation or suggestion to the committee would be to request the remaining administrative funds from the community preservation to allow us to engage the consultant and to move forward with that piece of the project. The only other alternative would be, again, to seek ARPA fundings. But I believe, again, the community preservation, the chairman doesn't speak for the whole committee. They'd have to meet and vote it. But he seemed pretty receptive to that and enthusiastic to see the next phase of the project, get moving. So if the committee were so inclined, and if somebody wanted to make a motion to seek the administrative funds request from the CPC, that would be appropriate, unless anybody has any questions.
I do have one question, John. If
Yeah.
they've got the 38K, if there's 28K left in their budget and we might need 30 to 40, do you have an idea where the other 10K will come from?
Well, we have 30,000 remaining that's uncommitted, Norm, in our budget after all the things that we discussed. Obviously, this project, it's just, we had a number of surprises. We had some large trees fall that cost us, $20,000 to remove trees. We had the electrical system pull off in a storm. Anytime you have a building, there's going to be ongoing costs. So, but we think, if we request those funds, that would give us enough to put it out on the street. And if anything else happens in the interim, the only other place to go would be to seek ARPA funds. If it's a small amount, we might be able to use the public buildings account to deal with something. But basically, with that funding and the remaining budget, we have enough to reasonably go out, engage the consultants, and get the process moving, which is really what we need to do at this point. And the key is, we want to move quickly, get this going, because then if we get out and, it's going to be a process. We don't know how many people might be interested. And then if they are interested, figuring out, well, what are they going to be seeking potentially from the town in order to make this project viable. But we want to get this going this summer, fall. And then if there is a solution and it requires some potentially some additional appropriation on the part of the town, want to be in a position to go back to town meeting in 2023 with this is the direction we'd like to move in. And if there's any additional subsidy required by the town to be in a position to lay that out. But I think at this stage, with those remaining funds from the CPC, we would have enough to move forward.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on that point? Oh, Julianne?
So this might go to Lori. With the information that you sent us about the historic resource funding, or what status that you sent that information, would we get any money from that or help with that?
So this is a technical assistance program, essentially. So this, I believe you're referring to the information I sent about Preservation Massachusetts most endangered building list. So essentially, if our building is selected, what we would get is we would get an extra level of attention for our building. So they would add us to their website and their social media outlets. They would also provide us with a press release that we could utilize to publicize the building and, you know, what we're trying to achieve, our desire to find a partner. And then they have a number of technical assistance resources that we would be able to avail ourselves of. They have a circuit rider program, and they offer advice, guidance, mentoring, referrals, and access to a whole array of resources. So there doesn't seem to be any negative. There's nothing that they're going to require from us. There's no legal ramifications for having our building on this list. I just think that, you know, they will give us guidance, and also Preservation Massachusetts is a very well-known state organization for historic preservation. So it's just another way to get our building out there and have people know that we are interested and we need a partner. So I think it'll be a win-win.
So as far as that, we're going to proceed with that. You know, it's not on your agenda. The town, you know, we have the authority to apply for grants and things of that nature. And so unless somebody has heartburn about that, the intent is to direct Lori as a staff initiative to apply for that. There's no downside. There's no appropriation required. There's no matching grants or anything like that. So all we can do is get some benefit. And probably the biggest benefit out of that process, as explained to me by Lori, is really just elevating the profile of our building and our project, to get it out there for more people to potentially, you know, take an interest in it. Timing would be good as well if we were selected, because we'd be out in an active marketing component, working with the consultant to try to get somebody to come in here and partner with us. So.
All right, do we need a motion to raid the remaining balance of the CPC fund? Admin fund?
To make the request of the
Oh.
CPC
Oh,
that they release the remaining administrative funds for purposes of hiring a consultant for the White Cliffs marketing.
if you want to put it like that, sure. Okay,
So moved.
Thank you, Julian.
second, somebody?
I'll second.
2 seconds.
Norm got there first. All right, any discussion? Good. Roll call. Norm,
Yes.
Julianne,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes,
and I vote yes, that carries. I think the only thing we're going to talk about maybe left is a next date.
And I'd like one more topic, Todd, if you don't mind. I was informed that the request for CPA funding for a year from now, the due date will be August. They're going back to the August deadline rather than November deadline. So at what point do we start to think about what funding do we need for the next few years? And what topics do we need to address for CPA fundings for this, for the facility? Do we need to consider taking down those problem childs of the building that are giving us moisture problems? Do we need to think about, I don't see us going in for big dollar values, but I think we need to think about what do we need to do for the building to keep it safe and secured for the next 3 to 4 years. That's what we're looking at. So all I want to do is put a bug in people's ear that August is soon, and what should we be thinking about for the next CPA request to support the property?
Could we, go ahead.
I would also put in your minds whether you want to spend a certain amount of money to at least get it to the point where it could be used on a limited basis for, say, community events. So that goes into the utilities in particular, getting the heating system so that it functions, any sort of plumbing work that might be necessary. And if there's some additional work that needs to be done to the electrical system so that it could, the doors could be opened on a limited basis for some purpose.
That would be millions. The code compliance to get that place opened for people, the public to go in, would be millions. I think that's beyond probably the scope, Lori, of what we would be able to do right now. It literally would be millions of code compliance pieces of it. But
at a minimum, we can put together, John, if you'd like, and I'm sorry, Todd, I can work with Sean on put together carrying costs, an annual carrying cost estimate, including some of these smaller ancillary items that come up that John kind of outlined. And so we have an idea looking forward that worst case scenario, CPC schedule comes up. Let's get 3 years of carrying costs, at least on the pallet here, on the plate, so that if nothing bears fruit, we can afford to keep the building going.
I think what we're going to wind up doing is we need to get this the consultant engaged and start that process. And that process then will inform what, if anything, kind of to Lori's point, like what is the town potentially going to need to bring to the table to make this project palatable or viable with a partner. Then it may very well be that, we need to do some of that code compliance work. But I think we're just not there just yet. I think we need to get this process moving. And then again, there's CPC and there's ARPA funding too, whether or not the Board of Selectmen has an appetite or desire to release some ARPA funding, that's a potential as well. The numbers though, as far as, getting the building up to code compliance, those numbers are pretty staggering, unfortunately.
But would we be able to put a placeholder in of some number so that CPC could, at least as these chimney things come up again, whatever the next thing is, I don't know that we can use CPC funds for carrying costs, but we can use it to repair, to protect historic things going forward. At least we have a pool of money that can be replenished for that.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to go, I just made a note. We're going to have to put together communication to the CPC requesting those administrative fees. And if I'm on that committee, and Todd, you are, they're going to want to know as part of that discussion before they release those funds, well, what's your end game or what's your plan? And I think we have a plan now, and we have a timeline, and we have a rough estimate in terms of budget to move forward. I think at that point we do say that we're not sure if we're going to if we can't make the August deadline. I think to Todd's point, if we think we are going to be making a request for, I don't know, to remove the additions, the smaller additions that are leaking in the back, and to remediate some of the hazardous materials, the asbestos that's in those. That might be a limited thing that we can do, to Lori's point again, of trying to make the place a little bit more attractive, at least remove the small bump outs in the back that are literally falling in and leading to some moisture infiltration, at least on the addition side. So I think we tell them, we're looking at it and we'll be back. The deadline is an arbitrary deadline. The CPC can keep that open. I think as long as the dialogue is there and they have some sense of when we might be coming back with additional information, my sense is they'd be willing to work with us.
All right. Does someone want to propose the John's artfully prepared motion about requesting the remaining balance in the admin fund from CPC?
The staff will put that together and request a meeting. And then if any members of the
Talk about
committee.
the motion though. Just
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion to do, just does someone want to make the motion to do that?
I thought we just voted on the administration.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, because you said raid, I worded it a little nicer and Julianne said so moved. So I think we're good there.
I wanted to
Did we-
make another
Did we
joke
do the
about
roll
that.
call vote?
I thought maybe we did.
I think we're good.
Okay.
So
Oh,
we'll
that's
put-
right, because I was gonna go to end the meeting. That was what I was.
Yeah, it was my fault that I extended it.
We'll put a communication together for the CPC with the request. And then when we have a meeting, we'll let the committee know. So if any committee members want to attend that meeting, that would be appropriate. I think again, just in brief conversations with the chairman, I think they're very supportive of the project. Again, I think the community is still very supportive of this project. They just want to know where are we going and what's our plan for getting there.
Julianne?
Okay, so to the point of bringing the building up to code, when I think we all know it's going to be very expensive, but I think for the taxpayers and for, just having an idea, if Sean, I don't know if this goes to your expertise or maybe it goes to our zoning person, but $1 million is different than $10 million when you're budgeting. So if there's, a more specific number that we could talk about at a next meeting, I think that would be helpful. And secondly, is there one more item on the agenda about scheduling a meeting for a limited walkthrough?
Well, before we get to that, if I can just address your comment, in order to be open to the public, you need to meet fire code, plumbing code, electrical code, and we're not there. We're not going to get there. I just want to be very clear. It's millions of dollars. When folks came to look at the place, the acquisition cost for that building was roughly $2 million. But when people brought their own teams, and here's the other thing, it'd be very expensive, Julianne. This is beyond the scope of staff. If you want someone to come in there and do a full code compliance on these things, when folks were looking at buying it before the town acquired it, and they went in there, acquisition was $2 million. They were looking for just a code compliance. It was multiple millions of dollars to do that. And so it's just beyond anything that we're going to entertain right now. Unless, we need a whole nother budget to get somebody to go in and to draft those numbers up. It's just the building is been offline for so long. It needs to be fully brought back to today's code, and just the fire suppression alone, in order to have people in that building, is well over between $500,000 and $750,000 just for fire suppression alone. So it's and now we have mold issues, things, air quality issues, things of that nature. All of that stuff ultimately would have to be remediated before anybody could step foot in that building in terms of public access. So just that gap is huge. And
Yeah, and there's no accessibility. I mean, you
Yeah,
can't treat it as a public building if you can't get into it accessibly. So there's no ramps, there's no elevators. Yeah, we're a long way from that.
just the elevator alone and that access is an addition, and that's another $500,000 to $700,000. So we're not going to get public into that building. It's not going to happen until we get a viable project. I would love to, but it's not going to be. You're looking at really a rehab of that structure in order to get it to the point where you can legally, safely bring people into that structure.
And Julian, just in direct response to your question about getting a cost estimate to bring this to compliance,
Mhm.
the most cost-effective way to put that number together would be to utilize the architect that has all the data and information and has gone through the different alternatives. But like John indicated, that original study was a couple of years ago. Codes change, conditions change. It would be very costly for even a consultant that has that integral knowledge of the building to put together a number. It could be done, but not by staff, and they would be the most logical firm to do that, and it would not be would not be a small bill.
They would actually hire a cost consultant to do that on their behalf as well. So it's sort of compound sort of.
As much as we'd all love to get into the building and have public into the building, it's just we need to get much further along. That really is the whole crux of the project, is to find a partner that will work with us to get this place up to code so it can be brought back online and be used. So.
Can we get back to Julia's other question, which is on the agenda? How do 5 members of this committee get access into the building and onto the grounds to see what today?
Well, we've had this discussion many times, but we'll look at it. But right now, I think we need to have some air quality done in there to see if it's even appropriate for people to be walking around.
I don't understand one fundamental thing here, John, and it's a point of contention with me. Your staff is able to go in. Well, 5 of us are responsible for that building, and we're not allowed in. I have a real problem with that. Is there something we need to sign?
Yeah.
Is it something because I haven't been in there for 7 years, and it's not that I don't trust Scott and Sean, but I think we need to have eyes on it. I don't want to go in on a Tuesday and just say we're coming in. I want to do it. Let's just get us in there once a year. I'm finding it extremely frustrating. And I think we have to find a way to get the 5 of us to just walk through and see where the building is and what the status is in the grounds. And
I understand that, Norm, and we'll work with you on that. Let's get the air quality test done and then figure out.
So now if I'm waiting for the air quality test, I'm sure I'll be lucky if that's 2 months away from now. I don't want to wait any longer. I'm really frustrated. This is a real point of contention with me. I think we can do better. Now, that's where I stand on this topic. It's a problem with me.
Norm, I've had access to the building periodically, especially when we're dealing with the roof repairs and the water leaks. I'd be happy to, with John's permission, I'd be happy to take people over there because I do have a key.
All right. Well, why don't we work on this, Norm, and see if we can't get something reasonable. Some sections of the building are not safe to be in. But maybe some main floor. Let me see if we can work out. I am concerned about safety. As you know, we're not covered for folks to be wandering around in the building. Staff is covered, but we'll figure it out.
That's my pet. We're considered civilians going into the building, but yet we're on this committee that's responsible for the building. I don't understand why we can't be deputized or something as being part of the town committee. There's something fundamentally.
Let me see what we can work out, Norm. Okay, I understand. I hear you. Let me see what we can work out. People just needs to be safe and not create a liability for the town. So let me see what we can do.
Okay. Said my piece.
Next meeting?
Let's see. Scott and Sean, what makes sense? Probably our next meeting will be, well, it won't be a joint meeting, but we'll probably be with the CPC. But what makes sense in terms of a timeline based on the votes today, getting moving?
We should be able to get the mold analysis done in the coming 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I would say. So, we're sitting here at the end of May. I would say that probably the second or third week in June, maybe the week of the 20th. We're on the 26th, so maybe even the week of, I would probably say the 13th or the 20th, those weeks.
Okay.
But I mean, it would be helpful to have it be after the CPC's meeting. So, I'm not sure, Todd, if you're aware of what the CPC schedule is or John's schedule.
They don't have any meeting schedule unless we request them to meet, I think is where they're at. Is that correct, Todd?
That's correct.
Yeah. So it's gonna we're probably looking at like the first 2 weeks in June, because we want them to have that meeting and take that vote before the end of the fiscal year, which would make sense then for us to meet on the week of the 20th.
Yep.
Does that work? I don't know what day, if there's a day that works better for folks or not.
I had a convention on the 22nd on.
How's the 23rd look for folks? The 22nd, we have our big Be Well Northborough kickoff at the Ellsworth McAfee Park.
Sorry, John, I can't do anything the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear
Yeah,
that.
I'm in Chicago.
What about the 21st? Is the 21st out, Diane? I'm sorry, I didn't.
That works. June 21st.
The 20th is Juneteenth, so we'll be closed. Legally, we're required to be closed. So I'm sorry, Diane. The 21st does or doesn't work?
It does.
It does?
Yeah.
Does it? Okay, so we've got staff meeting in the morning. We could do something here. Staff is available in the afternoon on
Works
the
for me.
21st. You want to say 2 p.m. on June 21st?
Okay.
Does that work for folks?
Let's
Yeah.
stop at 3 o'clock, but 2 o'clock is fine.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a long meeting, Diane.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
And I do have a question. How are we going to proceed now if we get these CPA administration funds for looking at possible not partners, but someone to help us with the RFP? How's that timing going to work? Do we have to have, does the money have to be spent by July the 1st from the CPA funding? And if that's the case, we'd have to make a decision of who we would work with before that date. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll look at the timing of that. Given that it's consulting services, we can, and Norm, you've been digging in this for a while. I don't think that I don't think we need a huge public bid for these services. There's only a handful of companies. They've sort of given us their proposals. We certainly can bring them in if that's something that the committee would like to do and talk to a couple of them. But we are going to need to make an award in fairly short order to get moving. And so.
So I guess, so keep us in the loop.
Well, do we want to try to bring in bring them in to the meeting on the 21st? To talk to them about the services? And
it may be, I mean, again, as John indicated, these services are exempt from 30B procurement, but a meeting the committee and our staff is important. Would it be a reasonable approach to try to get them in before the CPC meeting, so we have a chance to meet them, and so that on the 21st the decision is made? Unless you want to deliberate and decide that day on the 21st.
So you're talking about scheduling another meeting?
Yeah,
like the week of the 6th, something like that, Scott?
Yeah, like the week of the 6th, and just get them each in for 20-minute slot. If there's 3 of them, that's an hour, and then 20 minutes of deliberation afterwards, and that gives staff time to negotiate the terms of a contract. And that way, when you come to the 21st, you can make a motion if you so choose to engage prior to the end of the fiscal year. Or not.
Okay. Yeah, the week of the 6th is a tough week. I'm just trying to pick. Scott, you're on vacation on the 9th and the 10th.
Yep.
I mean, I've got Wednesday the 8th in the morning at 10. Is that, how's that look for people? June 8th at 10 a.m. We could try to bring, Norm, how many do you think you want to bring in?
I think there were two that showed the most promise. And
Okay. Again, I don't want to waste their time if they're really not a good fit for us. I know VHB was one.
and then Pellegrin to understand them better, I guess.
Okay,
I think that would be the best option.
so we can reach out to them and see if they're available to come in on that for a brief presentation.
But that's
I'm
not set yet. We have to find out if they're available, right?
Well, we're gonna, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that week is just tough to squeeze in. So we could reach out to them today and see if they're available on the 8th at 10 a.m. It's not a whole lot of notice, but again, they've sort of put essentially their proposals together. So it would be more a case of just having a discussion with them about what services they would be providing. If people have questions about the scope, things of that nature. Does that make sense? Does the 8th work for everybody?
Yes.
June 8th at 10 a.m.?
Good.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so we'll get on the horn today and try to get those, get them scheduled. So if it's going to work, we'll let you know right away. Okay.
I believe that's it. Can I get a motion to adjourn unless somebody has something else?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn this meeting.
You're the best. Can I get a second?
Second.
Tom got there. All right.
Great.
Norm.
Yes, you asking for, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Julianne,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
I vote yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. It was very informative
Excellent.
today. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.